there are still children sitting in classrooms who are waiting and hoping that a teacher is going to stand up and say, I'm here for you. I'm here to give you hope. I'm here to develop your identity. There's still much, much work to do.
Welcome to Schoolin Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds featuring prominent leaders, subject matter experts, and thought innovators with their perspectives on the current challenges facing K-12 education. I'm your host, Larissa Napolitan, a former teacher, instructional coach, and a member of the Branching Minds team. My hope is to shine a light on phenomenal educators and those that are on a mission to transform our schools and the lives of students. I am so excited to welcome our guest today, Emily Francis. Emily is a teacher of students learning English. So maybe let's just describe to us a little bit of your title and your background and share a little bit about yourself for our listeners.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for this space and this opportunity to share not just about me, but my book as well. So I really appreciate this opportunity. I am an ESL teacher. I teach English as a second language. I taught at the elementary level for 6 years before transitioning to the high school level. So this is my 11th year teaching ESL. And I mainly work with newcomer students. And that was the reason I transitioned from elementary to the high school, was because I work with students who reflect the same experiences that I lived I was 15 years old. So I found my niche, and I'm there working with high school students who are trying to get a high school diploma and learning English at the same time. So I see myself doing that for many, many years. But I'm an immigrant myself. So working with them is just working from the heart.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I forgot to mention, like you said, you have a book. You're also an author and speaker. I know you go to different conferences and share about your story. I learned a little bit about you from your online presence, and I was like, oh, she's busy. She's got lots of stuff going on. So, we're gonna kind of get into those things. But first of all, a lot of immigrants have different kinds of stories. So, what kind of drew you to be an educator and pursue this field and
I mean,
support students this way?
Yeah, I mean, being an education is something I wanted to do my whole life. If you read that part of my book, it tells you exactly where that seed was planted in my heart. But being an English language learner, that seemed like a so far away dream come true. Is just I struggled with so many factors to get to the point of becoming a teacher, and I think that's exactly what pushed me more to get this licensure to work with students who are experiencing the same things that I experienced. And so just the fact that I was able to get into a field where I can work with students to change that narrative, it's just like you said, your presence in social medias, I'm all over the place because the stories need to be heard about the possibilities, like
Mm-hmm.
I struggled, I went through all of these things, but the goal is to finally become a world changer. And I think that's what we're doing with students, trying to help them find that way, that path to become the world changers we want them to be.
Mm-hmm. And really, changing the world of one student can also change a family, can change
Yes.
a group of students, their friends, everyone that student interacts with can also be changed because of their story. I think that's so. I'm already got goosebumps. I'm so excited. This is
Yeah.
because I see that, like, in your intro in your book, you just said you talked about the power of stories and like how the need to share the stories. And so um I would love to talk just a little bit about your book. It's called If You Only Knew, Letters from an Immigrant Teacher. So what have you learned in the process of writing this book and sharing these stories with people? What's something maybe you've learned as you've talked about it and gone out to conferences and things like that?
Well, first of all, the reason the format of the book is about me and students is because in the process of making the book, we realized that me telling my story, I mean, in itself is powerful. I think an immigrant story in itself, a memoir, it brings a lot of light to those whose paths are totally different and brings that empathy. But and then as we were talking about the book, what brings light and passion for me to talk about what I do is the connections that I've been able to make with my students. And so the pedagogy that I use right now, the way I treat my students, the way I work with teachers, is all because of the connections that I've created with these immigrant students. And so, what I've learned throughout the book process is that as much as we want to tell our stories, we have to realize that our stories are shaped by those around us. And again, what I do and what I say and what I teach is all based on the experiences that I've had in classrooms. Yes, I bring to the classroom all this knowledge of an immigrant and, as a mother and as a daughter and a sister, but at the same time, learning and connecting with students has helped me go throughout the country and share, hey, there are still children sitting in classrooms who are waiting and hoping that a teacher is going to stand up and say, I'm here for you. I'm here to give you hope. I'm here to develop your identity. There's still much, much work to do. And so the process of the book has helped me push a little more, not to sell the book. Yes, I want you to buy the book and read, but at the same time, these 8 stories that you read in the book, 9 with mine, is they're going to give you a light or an idea of that child that is sitting in the classroom and might help you to guide them in the
Mhm.
right direction.
Well, and I want to read a quote here that just in your introduction, just about how you want people to remember two things: is that you're not alone,
Mm,
no matter what obstacles you're facing, whether it's being in a being new to a country or even just trying to fit in. We all struggle in some way at some point in our lives, and we often feel alone in those struggles. And
mm,
I love that note of just that telling stories makes us not feel so alone. And I think that there's power in that for educators in general. I think,
yeah,
as we, kind of are in this era of teachers feeling maybe alone in some of the struggles that they're dealing with, or even just alone in helping students, right? Like feeling like there's only so much of me to go around to help
yeah.
these students. So why do you think that like stories are important for educators? Like why do you think that?
I just think it brings that missing piece in academia. Like we are getting paid to teach reading and writing and all those core instructional areas that are helping our students grow in knowledge, but we're not all made of like book smart. We have a heart, we have a soul, we have culture, we have family, and all of that needs to be taken into account. And so as great as someone has just come out of college with all this knowledge and content, making connections with children and getting to know their stories is going to bring that peace that you need to be able
Mm,
to really connect with the student, to say, hey, it's not all about learning this content, it's not all about learning how to do this math problem, it's about being human, like really developing who you are, because really who we are is what's going to help you in society. Like, look what I'm doing right now. I'm out in the world using my own experiences to shape someone else's identity. And so our children are like that too. So if we only focus on content and not connecting with personal stories, we're teaching our children that it's all about academia and not really about human connections. Like, we all crave connections. We all want to say, oh, I'm like you, or oh, I'm different than you, but really had to be explicitly taught. Like, I, for 10 years, never shared my immigrant story until someone asked.
mm,
So for children, they are going to be hiding that story or putting it away, thinking that it's not important until someone asks. And I think it's us as educators to provide that space, that
mhm.
time, and that chair at the classroom for them to share their stories.
Well, I feel like this really resonates with me as an English teacher.
Mm,
One of the things I was really passionate about was students learning to write and having that rhythm of um telling their story and like doing that personal essay, that work to sort of like really dig into memories or even just
mm,
like how they experience life. And I think that that can be really powerful for them to learn. I mean, so many different aspects of content and academia, right? Like we can learn the content, but also, help them become human. Because I often said that as a as a middle school teacher, I it was also about helping them be human a little bit too, because learning those skills, but also learning how to understand themselves and how telling their story can be a part of healing. It can be part of just
absolutely.
figuring out what you want to do with your life. It could be figuring out just where you want to be. There's so many aspects of that that are
Right.
really important. And I like what you said about connection, how it's not just content but also connection.
Yes.
And I think it's so important, especially for learning. I mean, and that plays into brain science, right? Like it goes back to the idea of when we um make connections with other human beings, it connects in the brain, like,
Mhm.
and how
Yeah.
that really helps cement
Yeah.
those skills for those students.
Right, that's right. And if I can give you an example, you find that in the book with my economics teacher when I was finally able to leave the ESL classroom to go to a content classroom, sitting there with my economics teacher, open to page 134. Let's read about supply and demand. So there am I reading about a content that he's getting paid for to teach me, but at the same time, I'm reading it and making a personal connections because I knew all about supply and demand. I had sold oranges as a 9-year old. I knew what it was to supply and demand personally. So if I would have had a personal connection with that teacher, I would have raised my hand and say, "Hey, can I share with my peers
Mm,
about this, like real life stuff?" But because I never had that interaction with teachers, I kept that to myself. And look at that. That was a waste of
mhm.
interaction that I could have had. And that's why I'm so huge about, yes, we need to teach our content, but at the same time, let's find what our students already know about this and see what richness they can bring to enhance that piece of the academia in the
Yeah.
classroom.
Well, and I think, around here we talk about MTSS, and one of the
Mm,
aspects of MTSS is that
mm,
strengths-based
mhm.
instruction, and learning how to identify those strengths in a student and utilize that in the way that you help them. I mean, I just remember like I have students that were really gifted artists. And so I would help let them illustrate different things or use a picture to instead of writing something, because they wanted, I knew that they would like gravitate towards that. And
Right.
even more so is like, if I could, I was like, hey, can I use that for my next class? And they're like,
They feel
Okay.
good. That's
But that's what I think that, like, good teachers can find those gems in students and really, like, highlight that and shine that and help kinda dig for those diamonds of their skills and their strengths.
I
Um,
mhm.
but you have to have a relationship with those students, like you said, you have to build that connection, and I think that's why there's so much. I think there's a lot of statistics around, like, the power of a relationship with a student and how much that can impact what that student does in the classroom. So, like, I mean, I think we highlight on this podcast a lot how multifaceted teachers have to be and all
Yes.
the things that they have to do with students.
Yeah, like think in the moment too, because you could be like so focused in your content, and then you'll have a student who interrupts and say, "Hey, I have a connection," and you have to allow that space and time, and that may throw off your lesson plan a little bit. And in that moment, as a teacher, we just gotta switch hats and allow that student to interact with that content,
Mhm.
share with peers, and that creates connection not just with teacher to student, but student to student. because I never was able
Mm.
to interact with any of my peers. Nobody ever knew anything about me, as I couldn't make those connections unless they spoke Spanish then, but I never even told them anything. So
Mhm.
it's important to allow that time.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that is also true in, building the peer to peer, because I think that that helps with language development, is like that interactions from peer to peer and being able to actually, go beyond just the talking about homework and
Mhm.
building those friendships.
Yes,
And that's important for, I mean, social development and just being able to form relationships with students around them. So it
right.
makes them feel like they belong too. I think there's a huge part of, especially I would say think that students coming from another country, like there's already so many elements of that feeling like you don't belong, but like to not belong among peers, people who your own age, like like there's so many layers to it. And so
Absolutely.
building in that space and time for students to connect is also important too.
Totally agree. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So how have you seen your work in writing this book impact yourself as an educator and even just maybe the educators around you?
Well, I mean, I think as I read the book, I do see the strength of those connections with students. So I make it a goal to continue that same work that I started with making connections. So as soon as I get a new student, if it worked in the past, then I need to continue doing that. And then with other teachers is the work that I do is just teaching them how to make those connections. And a lot of teachers will say, well, I can't connect with students because we have different paths, our walks of lives have been different. But I truly believe that text can change that mindset. I mean, you have never walked in their shoes, but read about it. Like, you don't have to pick up my book, pick another book, but something that would open a window of view or something that you have never lived. And so really my goal is for teachers to get a hold of this book and to give it to students. I mean, as a teenager, I would have loved to grab a book like this and flip the pages and say, wow, that's me. I'm reading
Mm,
something that this person experienced, and look where she is. As a matter of fact, just yesterday I received a few messages from a teacher who's using my podcast where I share my story, and students are just left and right saying, oh my gosh, she did it, I can do it too.
mhm,
And so as long as teachers really are taking this book and open it for students to have make those connections and see the possibilities, I think that's I will be satisfied with that, having the book out.
So, okay, you go out and I know you do a lot of training, you participate in a lot of ways in helping educate teachers about not necessarily maybe the concepts in your book, but like in the areas of supporting English language learners. What excites you the most about training and leading teachers in this work?
I really not softening teachers' hearts, but I really having a mindset, like be seeing students at a different mindset. Like I've had a teacher after a training just last month, and she goes, "Listen, this is my 30th year teaching, and I have never seen ELLs." In a mindset that I've seen them today. That's 30 years in education. I was like, what? It's just it blew her mind how hearing a true story of an ELL, the experiences of what it is to be sitting in her classroom and not understanding a word she's saying and wanting, like longing to understand, but they don't. It's heartbreaking. And they don't see that,
Mm,
they don't understand that. And so just really going out and having teachers do one thing, just do something different. If you see that ELL sitting all the way in the back, maybe invite them and sitting them up front. Just you don't have to do a lot, just one
mhm,
thing at a time that will help that student feel that sense of belonging, helping them realize that they have a place in the room, that they matter. Like, really,
mhm,
all I got when I was in high school was like, good morning, hello, hi. Like, that's it. There was nothing beyond the hello. And I really think it's the kids are longing to have that relationship with teachers if they really care. And
Mhm.
so, I go out teaching methods and strategies and talking about the research behind it. But when I bring my personal experience to it, oh my gosh, you see hearts and minds just click. And I mean, as teachers, I do believe that it's not just about getting your licensure and that's it, you're done learning. This is my 11th year in the classroom and I'm still reading stuff like, "Oh my gosh, I've been doing this wrong." Like, we are always learning and changing our pedagogy. Our students' lives are different today than they were 10 years ago. So why would I be employing the same strategies when lives are different today? And so just going around bringing that new research and talking about new methods that are working, it's passionate to me. Like I wouldn't do that for for life. Like I like going out and talking to teachers and teaching teachers, but my passion is in the classroom. I just feel like that's where my fire lights up, and that's where I
Mhm.
find my joy. I love working with teachers, but working with big humans is not the same as little humans.
Oh, not at all. Oh, I remember when I was an instructional coach for about 4 years, worked with teachers, and then I went back to the classroom, and there was nothing
Uh,
like closing my door and just having fun with my students and really like there's something about just that time with them that is just
Absolutely.
I mean, and I remember being so disappointed, when we had to stay at home and we had to do virtual school. Like I missed their presence and just the amount of fun you can have with them. And I often say that now. The thing I miss the most about teaching is the kids because they are so much fun. And I love working with young people. I worked with 8th graders and
Oh,
they gave me such great hope about the future. And I mean, I don't know if you experienced this working with high school students, but some of these 8th graders and the way that they think and the things that they're passionate about and how they care so deeply about things. I just it gives me such great hope
yeah.
for this generation and just how much they want to see like change happen, and I don't know, it just makes me excited about where they're headed.
Right. Yeah.
And so many of them have the drive, and it's just
Yeah.
yeah, there's
And
nothing like watching that.
it's amazing to see that we have the power as educators to keep encouraging what we see or really discourage it. It's
Mm,
amazing the power that we have as educators that we can help our students go in either path because we can really look at our students' potential and ignore it. And that flame will go away. Like you're talking about kids being excited about being world changers, but if we don't provide them opportunities or platforms to show that potential, it dies off. Like if they put it away and they don't think it's important, or we could look at that potential and find ways for them to showcase it, to demonstrate it to the world. Somebody's going to get a hold of that awesomeness and is going to, highlight them out in the world. And so we I just cannot take for granted the power that we have as educators
mm,
to take that little life that is empowered to us and just help them go either way. Hopefully we sit down and we analyze our pedagogy, analyze our plans. Some of us may be planning in the parking lot. Man, we need to change that a little bit. Look at your lesson plans a little deeper to see how we can take that life and help them go in a better path.
oh, I think oftentimes we can forget that teachers can change the trajectory
Mhm.
of a student's life. One teacher, one comment, there's things that students will come back and say to me after I like kind of offhanded, not negative comments, but like just offhanded encouragement. And they're like, oh, that meant a lot to me. And I don't even remember saying it,
Right.
but
Mhm.
but that's why I think it's like if that's embedded in your practice
Yeah.
as a teacher and as an educator,
Mhm.
and I think even as a human being, to be encouraging to the people around you, to your students,
Mhm.
that plants seeds, right? And that is you never know who else is going to water it. And as a middle school teacher, I maybe didn't always get to see the end results.
Right.
They'd go on to high school.
Yes.
But it's so fun to see, it was fun to see my students graduate high school and go on and see them do really cool things,
Yeah.
and sometimes I'm like, I could see that as a middle school teacher, or
Mhm.
I could see them as, that way, and,
Mhm.
um, I think that there is that power, and you can see it, like, people who, accept Oscars and awards are, thanking a teacher, and they're
Wow.
like, "For that 3rd grade teacher who told me I could be a writer."
Wow.
Like, those are
Beautiful,
things that's like,
beautiful.
man, if you remember that from a 3rd grade, like,
Yeah.
every word out of your mouth should be as a teacher should be always encouraging, and just helpful to students seeing their potential, because they have so much potential,
Absolutely.
and we have to fan the flame, like you said. That's
Mhm.
that's a that's a great point.
Mhm.
So okay, I'm curious here what you think, because we talk a lot to administrators and leaders in schools trying to help inspire and coach teachers. What would you say to what should school leaders and educators know about English language learners in school?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that in order to support English language learners, there needs to be a community of support.
Mm,
I've learned when I started in this profession, especially as an ESL teacher, I thought, oh, I'm going to be their salvation. Like, I'm going to change them. I am, I. And it got to a point when I realized that I cannot do everything. And so, as administrators and teachers, we all need to understand that if we don't build a community of support on campus, our students might fall apart because they leave your classroom. Yes, you care for them, you coach them, you help them, but if they leave your classroom and they step on the next classroom and they are ignored the rest of the day, of no administrator checks on them or no counselor checks on them, then that's a waste of time. So I have learned that when they leave my classroom, the teacher next door is going to say hello to that ELL. The student counselor is going to check on them because they just came from another country. That social worker is going to check on, make sure they have what they need outside of campus. Like, I need to make sure that all the people on campus are aware that there's an ELL that needs support. And so that in itself has worked on my campus at least. I need my students to know that I'm not the only one, that yes, they can come to me if they need help, they can come to me if they need whatever, but they can also go next door and Miss Soul is going to help you, so that's so important. So as administrators, look for those body of supports that you can put in place for students.
mm,
So if the student is going from hole one to hole two, they need to make sure that there is someone in both holes that will support that student. I know it takes work. I mean, it takes work because, I mean, we have 890 students on my campus, but there's only 100 ELLs. So what can we do? What can we put in place to support that minority that really gets ignored in many times, and
mhm,
ignoring them can lead them to the wrong path, and we don't want that. So at front, we need to build that MTSS team that you were talking about.
mhm,
Call it MTSS because it's really not all about academics. I really think that the MTSS process needs to be for it's emotional support for immigrants who just came from another country, and that will be my biggest tip for everyone. Just get to know that children need a lot of people who understands them, not just one.
mhm. Well, and they need because I think feeling seen and feeling like, "Oh, they know that I'm here, they're paying attention, there's people I can go to ask for
Mhm.
help," like, having several people, because I think oftentimes, especially if you're learning a language too, like, feeling places where you can feel comfortable to mess up, to feel like even if you don't say something right, like, you feel safe.
Mhm.
It's so important to build those relationships, and that it takes time, and it takes intentionality, I think, on the adult's part to really check in on the student, to see what they need,
Yes.
to offer routes, because I know in my classroom I was ESL certified, so I had all the language learners, and what was fun about that was that there's some classes I had like more like a larger group of them and the
Mhm.
others, and so really trying to create a community of support, so it's like everyone in the class was, involved with each other, so that really helped them feel safe in
Yeah.
that way,
Yeah.
and but it took a lot of time and intentionality of, like,
Yes.
buddying kids up. Sometimes they're like, "Oh, I know they both like this thing," and
Right.
that's making those connections with students.
Mhm.
So, and I think also too, like that's like extracurriculars are a great way to help kids get involved and finding a place to feel like they have something in common with other people and adults too. So,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. So, any other advice that you would have for educators in helping them understand the immigrant journey or just even supporting English language learners?
Well, being an ESL teacher, I think second language acquisition is huge for me. And I think that's something that not a lot of teachers are aware of, how second language is acquired and how second language process works.
Mhm.
And so I've had teachers who said, well, he's been here for 6 months. He hasn't said a word. Well, second language process works a certain way. So sometimes the lack of knowledge can cause a teacher to be acting in a way that they shouldn't be acting, or being impatient toward an English language learner. I even had to learn how second language acquisition works, because I was living it, but I didn't understand. Like, I was confused why, prepositions are so hard, but second language acquisition shows that there are certain things in the language process that takes time. You're like, the writing could be like the last thing to be processed in certain students. So, and we're expecting them to do it in a year, So I really think a teacher who doesn't understand how second language works, read about it. There's so
Mhm.
much research out there that can highlight you in understanding that, hey, a student has been here 6 months and they haven't said a word. That's part of the culture shock. That's the way it is. It really takes 6 months for them to just be a sponge and not say anything.
Mhm.
And then after that, really, the learning of the second language acquisition will teach you what to do to help the student grow in linguistic levels. And so it's not just about the ESL teacher doing the work. I'm sorry, but
Mm.
research shows that it's not just me teaching English. We are all, you learn English in math, you learn English in social studies, you learn English in physical science. That's why I don't teach ESL in isolation. I go into the classroom. So while the student is learning math 3, I'm helping him with the English language, because that's what research says. And so the more we know about this research behind it, the more we're going to help students grow linguistically.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say that I think that that's important to note that it isn't just about, the ESL
Mhm.
teacher being that's
Mhm.
their kids, right? No, it's like everybody's
Oh,
kids, right? You want them to be I mean, that's part of language acquisition
mhm.
is like they need to be in that classroom with their peers learning alongside because I think that that is and that everyone it's like it's everyone's students, and
Yeah.
that it's also I think that's great, like, that you're right alongside them because I think
Yeah.
that that's helpful. I know as a teacher, I appreciated co-teaching with the ESL teachers
No.
because I always loved co-teaching because you there and I'm imperfect. There are things that I miss or that it's just like a rich experience for students to have someone else there
Right.
to alongside the teacher, to help them also for them to maybe ask questions quietly,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I think that that's
Mhm.
even someone that they maybe have a safe relationship, like, that they can be right there with
Yes.
them too is
Yes.
great.
Yes. One of my good friends who just did a seminar said, we don't know everything. That's Katie Topple. And that's why we need to build collaboration with teachers, because we build on somebody else's strength. And I was like, oh, that's what we do in co-teaching. Like, I'm walking into math 3. I'm not a math 3 expert. I'm clueless about I'm learning from the teacher, but I'm a second language acquisition expert. And so I'm taking my expertise and her expertise to help the student be successful. It's so important to see the value in others' strengths, because if I walk in there saying, I'm the one here saving this ELL, that's the wrong mindset. That's going to
Mhm.
push away that co-teacher versus luring that teacher toward that
Mhm.
cooperation piece.
Yeah, and that teacher probably learns things from you that then can impact all of the students.
Yeah.
Because I think that I always think there's concepts in differentiating instruction and differentiating for that language learners that also can help other students too
Mhm.
in small ways, because I think y those I don't know, it just, like, helps enrich the experience for everyone.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree.
So you talked a little bit about learning about, second language acquisition. Are there any other resources besides your book, of course, that you would point educators to that could be helpful in supporting their students?
I mean, I'm huge about, whenever a book comes out, a professional development book, I read it. And again, there's new research out there that is changing the pedagogy. Like something I used to do years ago doesn't work anymore, like popcorn reading. I used to be huge back then. It doesn't work anymore. So as I read a book, I'm like, oh, this is new. I'm going to change it. So Boosting Achievement by Carol Salva is a book that has taught me how to work with newcomer students. And Valentina Gonzalez writes a lot about reading and writing. Sarah Otto's book that says Language Lens teaches a teacher how to see their content through a language lens. So books like that, I mean, I can name many, many books, but as soon as the book is out, I'm like, I get my hands on that book because I need to learn more than what I already know. And so, I mean, read memoir. 2% of the books out there are about the immigrant experience. Solito just came out, and we have never had books out in the world about 9-year-olds crossing the desert. There it is. Read it.
Mm,
Lives have crossed deserts, but they have not written books about it until now. And so, anytime that something comes out there written by others who know more than we do, read it, get to know it, research.
yeah. Well, and I think that the other thing I would always tell teachers is to, especially English teachers in their classroom libraries, to be intentional about the
Mm,
books that they have available for students. Because if a student can read a book that reflects their life,
mm.
that makes them feel so not alone. Like you said, you're not alone, and
Yeah,
stories help you feel not alone.
yeah.
And because isn't I forget whose quote it is, but often, the idea that stories help you go, oh, me too? Like,
Oh,
like, oh,
mhm.
and I think that that is really powerful for students. I know that a lot of my students really appreciated when
Yeah,
they had books with characters that looked like them, that had experiences like them, because they see themselves reflected in those, and that's so powerful for
yeah.
human beings for that. Yeah.
And it shapes the teacher's perspectives too, because I can walk in a classroom and I don't know about your life, but if I see that you have a book on your desk about an immigrant experience, that will say a lot about you. Like, wow,
Mhm.
this teacher is reading about immigrant experiences. I want to know more. Like, I want to connect with her. Maybe she does care. So it's important for children to see you reading books like that. That way they can get closer to you, because it's like a mirror. It
Yeah.
reflects that you really care about other perspectives.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I love asking this question kind of at the end. For you, I know that you have a very unique background as far as your school experience, but did you have anything that in school that was fun for you that you thought was a really fun, like extracurricular, or like thing that you were like, this was actually fun. This kept you going back to school.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I can answer that question, but when I was in high school here in the United States, I would say that since we didn't have Google, I mean, it's fascinating today to pick up the phone and translate in a matter of seconds, but really pulling out a paper dictionary and thesaurus and just having translations and reading different levels of English words. I mean, for me, that was fun.
I love that.
I'm such a geek. I'm sorry, but that to me, like my mama can tell you, like at the table, I will spread out all kinds of dictionaries and look, oh, this word is similar to this word. So I was such a geek about trying to make those personal connections. So that was me. And even today, look at my books. I'm such a huge reader.
I
Like,
know, I was admiring your books on the
yeah,
background. I was like, "Ooh, I know that title."
so it carried on, as a kid involved in books and research and reading and study, and it carries on to today. So I guess that was my kind of fun. My
Hey, I
extracurricular.
everyone has their different kinds of fun. I think that's why I love asking that question because I think for everyone's experience was different and I always like to ask like what was the thing that, kept you coming back to school? Cuz some people it was extracurriculars, some people it was the arts and so it's always fun to learn a little bit about
No, to
our
me, it was
guests.
getting back to school and copying everything the teacher wrote because it was in a foreign language, and then coming back home and translating it. Oh, now I know what he's talking about. It was like a light bulb will go on after the fact. So that was just fun to do.
I love that. That's awesome. I mean, even if you didn't understand it, were you particular about your, like, handwriting? Because I was really, like, in high school, I was practiced my handwriting, and it's
Oh, no,
so
no, no, I
crazy.
didn't even care. Some of the times I didn't even understand what I wrote because they would write so fast and they will erase and then rewrite, and I'm like, "I didn't catch that phrase. Oh my god." It
You didn't have a camera on your, like,
No!
iPad or your
No,
phone to
the
take
teacher will say, "Take a picture of this because 'cause I'm about to turn the screen off," and I'm like, "I never had that, like, take a picture of it." Man, I didn't have that mental photography, how people just snap a picture with their mind.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't me. So, my chick
Oh.
would do.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting
Oh,
with me. It was
you.
a delight to get to know you and your story, and I'm so excited to tell people about your book
Oh,
and share it with all my educator friends because I know that this is really powerful and can change kids' lives. And so just thank you so much for talking with me today.
no, thank you for the space and time.
Thanks for listening to Schoolin' Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast to hear all our future episodes. As well, if you're enjoying our content, would you do us a favor and rate and review our podcast on iTunes? This helps others find our podcast and let us know how much you love what we're creating. Branching Minds is an educational technology company using learning sciences and technology to help districts effectively personalize learning through MTSS. To learn more about us, check out our website, branchingminds.com, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn @branchingminds.